fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is an amazing episode because Benjamin Percy boards the mothership. You know him as the writer of Wolverine and Ghost Rider. In this episode, we discuss Weapons of Vengeance and his new novel, The Sky Vault. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Percy. Thank you so much for coming to Versus Stars podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on.
It's totally my pleasure. I'm a big fan of yours, and so is my wife, who has loved your novels as well. So thank you so much.
She sounds like a wonderful woman.
She really is. She has great taste in books, apparently, right?
Exactly.
So I always start off with
hold on to her.
Oh, I totally plan to. I've been married 5 years, so far so good. So I always start off with a question of inspiration to inspire your love for comics and who your earliest influences.
Well, I moved around a lot as a kid, and comics were kind of a constant companion for me. I didn't have necessarily a comic shop that I could go to with regularity and have a pull list. Instead, I was, picking up comics from a mercantile, from a gas station, from a grocery store where spinner racks used to be available, or I was, picking them up at flea markets, garage sales. As a result of this, I really have no understanding of Marvel or DC continuity because I was buying everything out of order, and just buying things whenever I could. So there's a lot of holes in my memory, a lot of scrambled understanding of how all of these narratives fit together. But despite the fact that things were always changing, Conan, Batman, Daredevil, Wolverine, the X-Men, they were always there alongside me. So one of the things too that I loved about comics, besides the escapism, was the way in which these shared universes all rubbed up against one another, how all the titles were feeding towards like this larger tapestry of story, and it was so much fun to like recognize how, okay, this thing that happens in Green Lantern carries over to Wonder Woman, carries over to Superman, carries over to Batman, and how there'd be guest spots and crossovers, and just sort of learning that mythology. I guess it's the equivalent of how some kids these days nerd out on like reading Percy Jackson and recognizing how all these myths align with one another. At least that's that was my experience with my son, and how he was nerding out in that degree. I was nerding out in terms of the Marvel lineup of heroes and villains.
So speaking of myths, then, as someone who, as you said, apparently was not buying any consecutive run of any issue because of the manner in which you were purchasing, is the idea behind jumping on points then bullshit? Where there's like constant restarts on number ones because they're like, well, if you buy issue number 180 of an issue, no one in your new reader, you're not going to buy it because they're not going to understand the continuity. You were not buying understand content based on continuity. Is jumping on points bullshit?
I don't know about that being bullshit. I mean, it wasn't true for me just because that was the special circumstances with which I grew up. I was like, oh, look at that cover, I'm buying that. I do think that it's smart, and this is something I've tried to think about as a writer. I do think that it's smart to have shorter arcs, shorter story arcs. Like what I'll oftentimes do, and I have long runs with Wolverine and X-Force, what I'll oftentimes do is have a story arc that's like 2 issues or 3 issues. Rarely do I have anything that's 5 issues long. When I write my storylines, I'm thinking about the fact that people are intimidated by something that requires a lot of baggage, a lot of continuity to carry with it. So I might have a 1 shot, I might have a 2-issue arc, I might have a 3-issue arc. And what I'll do is, even if that's in sum total a 12-issue arc, it'll be interrupted, right? So I might bring in some Colossus stuff and some Russia stuff to X-Force and deal with it in 2 issues. but then I'll go on and pivot to something else and do a 2-issue storyline about maybe Domino or Quentin Quire. And then I'll pivot back, right, to that Colossus storyline with Mikhail Rasputin. And then maybe for 3 issues with him, and then pivot away again. And then there's something about Beast, right? And so it's like this turnstile effect. It makes it a lot easier for people to jump on board. Like if you're more of a casual reader, to come into a shop and be like, okay, this opens up a story called The Beast Agenda.
Mm.
And it's going to be 3 issues or 4 issues long. Actually, it builds off of a bunch of other stuff that's happened, but I'm trying to create like these sort of microclimate stories. Because I do think that there's a little bit of intimidation. You see that same sort of intimidation, I think, in the movies and the TV shows right now. Interest maybe is starting to wane a bit, and part of that might be it's just like that you have to know so much. You have that weighty luggage that you carry with you, and you might be watching one of these movies or watching one of these shows and be like, who's that? Happened with that character? There's just so much. It's not just Iron Man and Thor and Black Widow and Hulk anymore.
I will say though, it's amazing that we got to the point in the world of comic book nerdom and movies that we actually had that level of continuity now. That I never would have thought would get to that level of Marvel and comic book success. That now it's 30 movies now to catch up to the newest one.
And that's why probably we're looking at the DC universe, beginning anew, because maybe they've gotten to that point where there's too much to carry along, and they just want to kind of like implode and start over again.
Yeah.
We'll see if that happens with Marvel as well.
I would imagine. I mean, I think it's helping them a little bit that they are trying to create a new slate after Phase 4 and trying to, introduce some new characters. I mean,
no more new characters.
But I do think it's pretty cool. But so you actually have a crossover going on right now in your in the Percyverse of comic books. Percyverse. Right. You got Ghost Rider and Wolverine crossing over to what's called Weapons of Vengeance Alpha.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, a great series. I had the pleasure of reading it. So basically, you have in the story a boy named Bram. Is it Bram or Bram? Bram.
Like Bram Stoker, just a little bit of a horror nod there.
Oh, very cool. And he's possessed by a demon. You also have Johnny Blaze in the story, who's possessed by the spirit of vengeance. And then you have Wolverine, who's kind of like metaphorically possessed by the berserker rage that he has inside him, like the animal in him. So are the demons that possess us the theme of this series?
Absolutely, yeah. All these characters are haunted. They're all possessed. They all lose control. Johnny and Logan have a lot in common. I mean, the fact that they're loners, the fact that they're anti-heroes, they've done a lot that they're not proud of, and they're, trying in their gritty, shadow-soaked way to redeem themselves, to seek out a kind of atonement, to earn their place on the planet. So absolutely, that theme of possession runs throughout.
Now, interestingly, you mentioned them as loners, but you have in the alpha issue of Weapons of Vengeance, you have the narrator Wolverine Logan discussing that maybe they do have this draw for family somewhere in their subconscious. They have this need to have a team around them or others around them. And Ghost Rider has been on a team. Can't remember the name of the team that he was on. But he's been on was it Defenders, or I can't remember what group of team that he had been on in the past.
He's popped around, but if you think about like Midnight Suns and such, I mean, there's he in all these cases, right? It's interesting how like Logan is someone who thinks he belongs out in the wilderness far from anybody else, because when people are drawn into his gravitational pull, they get hurt. And yet over and over and over again, he finds himself on teams. And that's probably the best medicine there is for him, right? He's forced to protect others. He's also forced to be around people who are incredibly vulnerable compared to him. And it makes him a better mutant. In the same way, Johnny, I right now have him teamed up with Talia Warroad. He's teamed up over time with many people, in this case Wolverine, and there's just that that recognition between them that they're stronger together. They can do more good together. In this case, it was really fun to write them together too, because I was able to fill in a gap of lost Marvel canon, despite the fact that they've appeared on the page many times over the years. Nobody's ever clocked their first encounter, so that was really cool to be able to, add that notch to the belt with Jeff Shaw.
Now, talk about commonality between these two characters, because even though they seem very distinct, like, oh, Wolverine being a mutant and Spirit of Vengeance, Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, they do have some similarities, other than we said one, the idea of possession. Another commonality is the fact that on some level, both of them they're not immortal, but they're virtually. I mean, Ghost Rider itself can
Hard
go
to
on,
kill, yeah.
yeah, and Wolverine, because his healing, who knows how long he can actually live for as well. How does that affect them, and how does that connect them? The idea that these are two characters who could very well be relatively immortal, as far as how long they could survive based on their powers.
I mean, there's a responsibility that comes with that, of course. As you see people shredded and decayed all around you, day after day, year after year, and you're still here, you recognize that you need to stand up and do something about it. That old Spider-Man adage. Uh, it's also just, I don't know, like the immortal quality of the vampire. The vampire, and that's one of the reasons I brought vampires into the Wolverine series early on. I thought there was an interesting dichotomy there. Point of view of the eternal. I'm
Mm,
not saying Wolverine's necessarily eternal. I'm not saying Ghost Rider is necessarily eternal, but you know, there's they're still here, right?
mm,
They're still here a lot longer than they should have been. They've survived a great deal, including in Logan's case, nuclear apocalypse and everything else. Um, so so what happens? Like the vampire feeds off of others,
mm,
uh, sometimes depending on the mythology, without regret. Sometimes with regret, but they feed off of others. The death of others, ensures their existence, and it's almost like the opposite is true of Logan. The longer he lives and the more blood that he sees shed, or the more killing that even he might be responsible for. It's almost like that drains him.
mm,
The more blood without, the less within.
mm,
And so there's this sense that he needs to save all those around. I mean, they're almost like infantile compared to him.
mm,
He's like practically as old as a mountain, it sometimes feels. So
mm.
when you can recognize that the fragility of life, I think that it can have the effect of making you value it all the more.
Now, going kind of connecting the dots between his and Ghost Rider's desire for some level of team and family, also the cost of being immortal, as you mentioned. How does that affect their choices and who they allow around them? How closely they will willing to connect to those who are around them? And does the conflict is there a conflict between wanting to have family and knowing you're going to outlast your family?
Sure. I mean, right? You want to push people away because you're going to have to, well, you're going to push them away because evil forces are oftentimes drawn to them. Sometimes that's like a government agency, a shadow agency wanting to, you know, harvest up an arsenal in Logan, or in this case, even Blaze. Um, sometimes it's the fact that you're just going to outlast these people, and that's going to hurt.
Mm,
That's going to hurt your heart, and an emotional wound will go so much deeper for these two characters than any physical wound they can endure.
mm.
So yeah, they're going to push people away, and they're only going to allow people in their orbit very carefully.
Now, to also discuss another commonality, like I said, the name of the story is Weapons of Vengeance. Um,
Got to have some good vengeance in the title with
right, right.
Ghost Rider, but also playing off that whole Weapon X thing, the
Yeah.
Weapons X program, right? I binded them together perfectly.
Now, when you think about Wolverine and Ghost Rider and the idea of the word vengeance, does Logan and Ghost Rider view vengeance the same way?
Oh, that's a good question. Uh, I mean, commonalities and divergences. I'm sure they're, you know, Logan Logan is oftentimes finds himself like seeking revenge, or trying to balance the scales. Um, latest example of that, here I am with the fall of X going on, and this Ghost Rider crossover touches on that, but you've also probably seen previews of what's to come. And the fact that Orcus took out the Hellfire Gala, took out, killing and exiling all of the mutants, like Wolverine is about to enter into a storyline called Last Mutant Standing. And as you can guess, like he's gonna have a scorched earth policy.
Mm.
And he's gonna be, reaping uh and going after Orcus as this storyline progresses. So there's that. But I mean, with Johnny Blaze, he's almost trying to, like, there's this spirit that it's chosen him as a vehicle. You know, it's there's kind of like a thematic parallel between the way Johnny treats a bike and the way that the spirit of vengeance treats Johnny.
Mm.
And so all he can do is kind of like try to warp and try to control and try to direct the spirit as best he can, so that the writer doesn't, you know, uh, make this hell on earth. The writer is incredibly dangerous, and it's like only through Johnny Blaze's will, uh, and sort of the way that they both have their hands on those on the steering of that fiery cycle. It's only in that way that he's able to sort of guide his future forward towards something that's even nominally heroic. So I think Logan has a little bit more of, it's almost like Logan as Weapon X or as a member of Team X used to be a demon. And even though he's overcome by a berserker rage now and then, he's more thinking about past sins that's directing his current behavior. Whereas Johnny is every day, every second, struggling to control, this specter within him.
Now, when an interesting moment happens in the alpha issue of this crossover, and it's a great moment, as you mentioned, the first meeting between Wolverine and Ghost Rider. And during the meeting, Ghost Rider references Wolverine as being an evil. Now, Wolverine has killed a lot of people in his time. I mean, he has some pretty, if you look at the river of blood that he probably created, it's pretty damn deep. I mean, it's damming over a lot of land with this guy.
No, I once wrote the line. At some point in my run, I've written the line, I've spilled enough blood to fill a reservoir.
Oh, that is a wonderful line. That's a wonderful line. So in Ghost Rider's opinion, because Ghost Rider once again is the penance steer, he goes against sinners, and he can look deeply into Wolverine. To Ghost Rider, then, is Wolverine evil? How does Wolverine feel about the potential of that? Because I know on some level, Wolverine has tried to be a hero many times.
Well, I guess the thing I think about with Wolverine is that he carries his scars on the inside, right? That his healing factor enables him to overcome any wound, except the ones that are emotional, that are existential, psychological. He, his memory's all screwy, but he still like knows what he's done. Sometimes foggily, sometimes vividly. And those scars direct him, like they educate him. Regret is his teacher. So if Ghost Rider were to come along and, penance stare him or purify him or whatever else, wash away his sins, eat his sins, like any of those situations would be a bad education. Like if Wolverine, like if Ghost Rider gobbled up all of Wolverine's sins and forgave him, I don't know that Wolverine would be as good of a hero as he is right now. And certainly if, he was damned to hell, well, we know how that turns out. We've been there before. But like Wolverine every day is in his own personal hell. He doesn't need anybody to punish him. He's already punishing himself.
So does Ghost Rider? 'Cause I know, like I said, they are teaming up. Does Ghost Rider then view Wolverine as a hero, or that's evil thing that is a murderer? Because, like I said, Osley has a deep hatred for those who.
I think he just recognizes a kindred spirit.
Hmm.
You know, that here's somebody suffering along the same dark highways as I am, and you know, let's make some heavy metal together.
Another great character in the book is Bram, and Bram's a fascinating character. He's sort of Ghost Rider-ish, as in there's a demon who's kind of hitched a ride on him. I'm sure we'll get more details on how that all played out at some point. He's targeting the future Bram, the older Bram is targeting mutants. For those who may not have read the Alpha story, he was rejected by Xavier because he's not really a mutant. He's this kind of possessed being. So is his attack on mutants then personal due to that rejection? Is it something more? Is it the demon making those decisions? How does that play out?
Well, that's kind of a spoiler heavy question right there. In the
Sorry.
final issue, you're going to understand completely the story of Bram and what brought him to this state and why he's hunting down mutants in particular. There's a little bit of that in issue 3 as well, issue 3 of the crossover. But he's he's lashing out to begin with. Well, I can't even say that because that's a spoiler as well. Let's just say that this character Bram is a kind of hybrid organism, just like Johnny and the Spirit, right? So he is a character who's possessed. There is a demonic force within him. That demonic force has an intent, but in this case, be thinking about the way in which the weapons program, and I've touched on this earlier in my Ghost Rider run with Infernal Labs. Infernal Labs was trying to figure out a way, it was a tech startup, trying to find a way to like corral the forces of hell, weaponize them, use them as tech. So Weapons Plus has stepped in where Infernal Labs ended. And, with Project Hellfire, they're looking to characters like Blaze, and they're looking to characters like Danny. They're looking to characters like Bram as collaborators.
So, at least I'm not sure how much you can spill, but I'm gonna poke a little bit at you.
Yeah.
How much in control is Bram then?
Yeah. I mean, there's some big emotional moments for Bram in the last issue in particular that will, give you that answer in full. But I guess I'll just say that, right now, from what we've witnessed, he's pretty desperate. He's desperate as a kid. I mean, it's compulsory. He has to kill, but it sickens him, and he hates that it's resulted in a life without love, really. But, and this is something that Johnny has struggled with, there's the recognition that when something lives inside of you for a long time, you almost can't survive without the other. Right? That you almost become like as dependent upon one another as an organ.
So,
Yeah.
how much backstory are we going to get on the demon aspect of him, or are they so interchangeable that you can't really discuss them as separate entities?
The demon and Bram both have their own unique stories. The demon is older than Bram, I will say that. So the demon story tracks, the mythology of that tracks back a lot farther than the boy.
Oh, that's cool.
Connected to Mephisto.
Ooh, very cool. So obviously there's some in the some storyline of him being back with the original X-Men. So there's a lot that's happened obviously in between from when he was a kid, when he was brought to the X-Men to where he is now. How much story is there in the middle that you're going to be sharing with us? And are we going to be looking at a lot more potential brand appearances in the future?
Yeah, Bram is, a through line throughout the story. This is in a way a murder mystery, right? Like something happened in the past, something terrible happened in the past, and now it's happening again. Why? Who's to blame? right? Wolverine and Blaze failed to stop this evil before. They're all in now. And there's a kind of David Fincher-esque quality to it. When I first pitched it, I was like, I want to do kind of a, you know, Seven, like a version of Seven for Marvel.
Mm.
And it has that shadow-soaked noir, blood dappled flavor to it, I think. And so moving forward, we're going to learn more about the Bram from the past, more about the Bram in the present, and also comprehend, that this is not necessarily anymore an individual acting alone, but in the past with the involvement of Mephisto, in the future with the involvement of Weapons Plus, it's become something much more complicated and potentially even world threatening.
Because of the brand situation, how unique is it? Are there a lot more individuals in this world that are like Brand, or is he truly a unique entity?
He's unique. Yeah.
Okay.
He's he's a cool mythological figure. The demon connected to him is, has a really sweet, sinister backstory. So I hope people get on board with it. I can't say at this point. We're only calling the demon Stitcher right now, but you'll learn more about the true name of the demon in the weeks to come.
So, how many issues is this crossover?
It's 4 issues altogether.
4 issues.
You see, you've had the Alpha, you've had Ghost Rider. This Wednesday, Wolverine comes out, which introduces Helverine, and you can guess how that goes. And then the final issue is the Omega, and that's an oversized 30-pager.
So, what can you hint about what's going to come up next, and where are these titles headed once this crossover ends?
I mean, if you look at the cover, that Ryan Stegman cover of the Helverine, I guess you could say Hot Claws are back. But Wolverine possessed by the spirit of vengeance.
Ooh, that sounds awesome.
Is pretty terrifying if you think about what, just like if you take consider Wolverine to be a weapon of mass destruction.
Mm.
And then you hell power him, that's letting the world's most deadly lawnmower loose.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's such a good, entertaining story. Like I said, I had a pleasure reading the first couple of issues of it so far, and it's really awesome. So I just want to thank you so much for making a very cool comic book series with them. And Wolverine Ghost Rider seemed like a natural pairing. Once you think about it, you're like, oh shit, they really are.
Yeah, no, dream team. I'm so glad to be writing it.
And I must admit, it kind of reminded me, because one of my favorite couple of issues going back some years ago is what did Howard Mackie Ghost Rider run when Wolverine and the X-Men show up in Ghost Rider. I love those. So thank you so much for bringing them back again.
I'm happy to. And yeah, they're letting me do so much fun stuff with Wolverine. I mean, got this Wolverine Predator crossover coming up as well. And
very cool.
It's just, and then I've got Sabretooth War that got announced. So it's like, they're letting me just bust out all the toys and make some great mayhem.
It was kind of fun. I was online and someone made, I guess, a fan live action Wolverine versus Predator video. Did you ever see it?
I got tagged online after the announcement for the Predator Wolverine thing. A lot of people were tagging me with that video, so I did watch a few minutes of it, and it was entertaining.
It's amazing what people are capable of doing. Like I will say, I'm not one of the people who tagged you.
By the special effects in particular.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, this budget's actually pretty good. Maybe Marvel should give him a phone call.
Yeah, it was fun. I'm not sure how long ago that was made, but they had the Predator cloaking technology down.
Yeah.
They had the claw pops and everything.
I thought they did a good job. And I like the Wolverine. It was the right height. It was like they made the small Wolverine, like the right. 5'4" Wolverine. Yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Supposed to be a runt,
right?
As Victor Creed always says.
Indeed. So anyway, you also have a new novel releasing on September 12th called The Sky Vault.
Yeah.
The novel is the third book of the Comet cycle. So how does this novel connect to the other two?
So with the Comet cycle, I was thinking about Marvel. I was thinking about DC. I love writing for these companies, but the characters don't belong to me. So I wanted to create kind of my own universe, my own comic book universe in a way. So all of these books are triggered by the same event. A comet comes streaking through the solar system, the Earth spins through the debris field, and new matter is introduced to the world. New matter that new elements that, shake up the geopolitical theater, that shake up the laws of physics, biology, geology, elements that create, in a very DC Marvel way, a new dawn of heroes and villains.
Mm.
So every book takes place at the same time. As a result of that, you can read them in any order. I was talking before about one of the things I loved about DC or Marvel growing up, and the way that the stories would feed into each other.
Mm.
So that's the way I'm thinking about this cycle. Like,
Mm.
it's not a series in a traditional sense. These aren't sequels to one another. They're more like a family of books, or a bestiary of books. So every book has like its own location. So the first book takes place in Minnesota. The second book takes place in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle. The third book takes place in Alaska. And they focus on different elements. So like the first book focused on omnimetal, which is kind of a vibranium. Like, it's one of the things that comes crashing down from the sky, and it's localized in Minnesota, and it creates like this boom town, like a Deadwood 2.0 situation where people are flocking from all over the world because this metal is kinetic. It soaks up energy. And so it has a lot of implications for the energy sector and the weapons sector. The second book has to do with alien fungus. And the third book, The Sky Vault, which comes out on September 12th, has to do with dueling timelines. Dueling timelines that take place now and that take place during World War II. World War II is very much on everybody's mind right now because of Oppenheimer. You all know about the Manhattan Project. I'm introducing you to a simultaneous government experiment called the Alaska Project.
Ooh, very cool.
So there's a secret government laboratory in Alaska, in the wilds of Alaska, outside of Fairbanks. And instead of trying to split the atom, they are trying to rotate or spin the atom. And I did some deep dives into theoretical physics about this. The idea that by rotating or spinning the atom, you can hypothetically create a wormhole.
Ooh.
A wormhole that could result in something like, a time travel portal, or an interdimensional portal, or portals that could lead you sort of X-Men style, gateway style, from one side of the earth to the other in an instant. So they're experimenting with this technology, and something happens. And the something that happens in the past is intersecting with something that happens in the present. So I guess there's a little bit of the same framing as you see in the Ghost Rider Wolverine crossover in this novel, because strange things are afoot in Alaska.
Now,
I'd say.
So I mean, I know you're being billed as the final book of the Comet cycle, but
yeah, final book for now, let's say, because this could be 6 books, it could be 12 books.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not abandoning this world. I mean, this universe you're creating. You're just, this is just cycles out the origin story of it, or is this
the initial arc, of the books that are happening simultaneously soon after the debris hits the earth. The other books, assuming I can continue to write them, will take place in the time to follow. Right now I'm working on a pilot and a pitch with Sony, and as soon as the writer's strike is over, we'll be taking it out to streamers. And yeah, if we get lucky enough to sell it to a streamer, then I will promise you that there will be many more Comet Cycle books.
And you'll come back and talk about them, I imagine.
Oh yeah.
Very cool. I mean, it sounds awesome. So once again, I would like to say that the last book, we talked about the fungus. That was like an amazing deep dive, and I really liked how it connects to was it that the fungus on the ant that kind of does that zombie control thing?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say like that was like the more information I had about fungus. I think that anything was fascinating.
yeah. And if you've seen The Last of Us, which uh, came out after The Unfamiliar Garden, I know there's a video game, but the in watching that show, I'd never played the video game. I was like, whoa, there's some nice parallels between this and The Unfamiliar Garden, and fungus is probably going to kill us all one day.
So how does the omnimetal, the fungus, and this time thing all correlate with one another?
Well, that's one of the big spoilers of book 3, in
Okay.
that it's going to provide you with the answers for where all of this came from and what it means, because there are only so many elements on the periodic table, and where these new elements came from isn't clear. The Big Bang is not responsible for them, so we might be getting into some multiverse possibilities here.
Very cool. And as you said, and the third book, Skyvault, takes place in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Yeah.
How intentional is this location within the story of of this novel?
A few different reasons I wanted to set it there. One, I've been to Alaska several times, and I just find it a really inspiring place. They refer to themselves as the last frontier, and I like the idea that they're at the edge of the map. They're at the edge of the map as a liminal space. Like, it truly is a wilderness area. It truly is a place that feels unexplored. It feels dangerous. It feels like if you're writing about the confluence of territories, of even cosmic territories, a good place to explore that. But also the fact that it's just sort of like uncharted, just like some of the elements I'm talking about here. The ultimate wilderness being space itself. And so there's that, but there's also the fact that a government lab would be a perfect location for one that's trying to uh, remain off the grid from everybody's attention. But also, when I was up there, I was noticing all of these different weather labs. There's a lot of weather research that happens up there because of the dark skies, because of the lack of pollution, because of just like the atmospheric clarity allows for it. And so you drive around, it really feels like you're going through like a Stranger Things set. Like, there are all these they look both futuristic and retro. Um, and you'll be like in the middle of the woods, and there'll just be these towers and these and radar and telescopes set up, and so that's when I started thinking about this novel first, is when I was traveling up there.
That's, I mean, very cool. I always wanted to go to Alaska, but obviously it's expensive. I've always wanted to visit.
But you gotta go. I've never been any place that is just that dramatically gorgeous. It's the ultimate in nature porn.
Oh, very cool. So we know the third book centers around a plane crash. What else can you tease for our listeners about the Skyvault?
Well, it's not a plane crash. It's actually a plane disappearance. In that, as a plane is traveling through the skies over Fairbanks, there are some strange formations in the clouds. As it turns out, this plane vanishes for over a minute. It falls off the radar for over a minute before reappearing. And this has lasting effects on all the passengers on board. Soon thereafter, a government agent shows up in town and starts collecting evidence. People on board begin to die, or some of them to seemingly disappear, maybe into a government lab as they're experimented on. And we also have the story of a contractor who's hired to build something she doesn't quite understand on the ruins of that old World War II laboratory up in the White Mountains. And of course, there's a retired sheriff who's upset by the government agents who have showed up, and he's doing some investigation of his own into what exactly is happening here. In one case, he discovers that there's an elk, the body of an elk that's found on top of a skyscraper, one of the lone skyscrapers in Fairbanks, Alaska, that there's a dead elk on top of it. And, you know, there's all sorts of strange things happening. So this phenomena has an explanation, and it all ties back to World War II.
It sounds absolutely awesome, and it comes out. It's like we said, 9/12. I'm sure it can be pre-ordered now for our listeners. But 9/12 Skyvault comes out. Mr. Percy, it's been an absolute honor to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun chatting. You too.